Our neighbor Bill, who lived 2 doors down from us, died last year. At 89, after a long battle with melanoma, his passing wasn't unexpected, but still, he's missed. Bill was what you'd call a feisty old guy, and a bit of a character. He worked for decades supervising a crew that maintained one of the largest parks in Chicago, and was in pretty good shape until he developed skin cancer from years of unprotected sun exposure. Even then, he managed to bounce back several times from surgeries done in an attempt to halt his illness. When we'd ask him how he was doing, he'd say, "Okay, I guess, I'm still above ground." Bill's house is similar to ours, an old four-square built in the mid to late 1910s. Long divorced when we first met him, he shared his spacious quarters with 2 roommates, a man and woman who often helped him out by running errands. His grown kids were always in and out too, meaning he had a good setup for aging in place. After Bill got sick, he applied for and received a city sticker and handicap sign that designated the parking spot in front of his house for his use only. During the time he was still able to get around, you'd often see him getting into his Jeep to go have lunch with one of his retired Park District buddies. Seeing him on a fairly regular basis, we knew Bill was still fighting his cancer early last summer. We only learned he was on the decline when we ran into his daughter one day, and she told us his doctors had recommended hospice. Bill didn't want to die in some unfamiliar place, so he asked her if she'd be willing to care for him at home. She said yes because she loved him very much. After that, we didn't see her for a couple of weeks, so we assumed Bill was still around, confined to his upstairs bedroom. I'm not sure how to say this, but I felt very strongly he was still this side of the veil, a belief confirmed one night when I seemed to see him from one of our second-story windows, sitting at the wheel of his Jeep. There was no mistaking the small, wiry frame and white hair, and I wondered how he'd made it downstairs considering how ill he was. Still, I knew Bill was strong-willed, and if he wanted to do something, he darn well was going to do it, even if it took every bit of his rapidly fading strength. I turned my head briefly to call my husband so he could come see what our neighbor was up to, and when I turned back, the car was empty. How, in 2 seconds, had a sickly, almost 90-year-old man made it back into his house? Since my vision, with correction, is pretty good, I ended up chalking up what I'd seen to some odd effect of the street lights that made it look like someone had been sitting in the driver's seat. A couple of days later, my husband was trimming our hedges when Bill's daughter emerged from his house. During their conversation, she mentioned her father had passed peacefully 3 days earlier, and that she'd given his roommates a couple of weeks to find other accommodations. After that, her sisters and brothers would be cleaning out the house in order to put it up for sale. When my husband told me this, I realized I'd seen Bill a day after he died. All I can think is that his spirit, freed from its corporeal existence, decided to celebrate by going for a ride before realizing it no longer needed an earthly vehicle to travel. I'm an open skeptic about the paranormal, but I had an experience some time ago that isn't really scary, but I find interesting. 25 years ago, I worked at a microfilm company where I managed archival preservation projects. One time, a person on my staff was assigned to do an on-site job but couldn't do it, so I went ahead. It was in an old 1920s Gothic-looking mausoleum where a camera was set up in one of the rooms. So I filmed the material, bring back the film, and have it processed. And while inspecting, I noticed these strange light leaks on some of the frames. I know I took the necessary precautions in loading and unloading the film, so it baffled me how this happened, and they were unusual streaks of light. Next day, I go to the location, refilm the material, and this time take the camera head and some of the equipment back with me, going straight home since it was late, planning to bring everything to work the next morning. That evening, I was at my computer when I felt a burning sensation on my back. I look in the mirror and see small, parallel scratches running down my lower back. I'd never felt a burning sensation like that before, with superficial scratches that went away in few hours. I figured I must have done this somehow and let it go. This was before all the ghost TV programs, so I had never seen or known about these things happening. And wires later, when I'm watching those ghost paranormal shows on TV and see this type of thing occurring quite often, scratching and light streaks, it makes wonder about my experience to this day. A few months back, it was like 2 in the morning. My baby woke up hungry, so I went into the kitchen to get stuff to make a bottle. My hands are full, so when I go to turn off the light, I drop the thing of formula. I swear to God, I hear a voice say, "Are you okay?" I looked around because maybe my mom or cousin was up using the bathroom or something and thought I got hurt. No one was there. Walked past my mom's room and called her name. No answer, just snores. Now, my grandma passed away in this house, so maybe it was her, but I don't know. It was freaky since I was still half asleep. Sometimes I also think it could have been my older sister who passed in 2020, but it didn't sound like her. I don't know if they sound the same after they die and stuff, but it wasn't a voice I knew. I remember the evening something made itself known that I won't forget, as when experiences such as the one I had tend to stick with you. It was a summer night on my reserve Native American village, and I live in rural northern Ontario, Canada. Every summer we usually have a fundraising event called Summerfest. It's an outdoor softball tournament with great food, live music, and of course the beer garden. I was 14 at the time, so of course I wasn't out to enjoy myself. I was home alone enjoying the house to myself while my mother was out in town, and a family friend was renting the spare bedroom. We say as a people, when you're drinking that stuff they do at the parties and smoking that smoke, spirits can find their way to you. I'm sure other cultures feel this way as well. It was a normal night for me. I was watching TV, eating popcorn, taking a break, going on YouTube, enjoying the living room. It wasn't until later our family friend got in from partying all night, I'd say around 2:30 a.m. I heard him come in and come upstairs, looks at me all glassy-eyed and asks what's up and how my night's going. He was a super friendly guy and always helped around the house and yard when he could. The guy made a weird drunken sandwich in the kitchen attached to the living room. His name is Anthony, if you were wondering. I remember sitting on the couch looking at this guy, laughing at how drunk an adult can get. As he poured himself a glass of water, he went quiet and stared into the kitchen window above the sink. He asked me if I seen what he's seen. I just looked at him wondering what's his problem. Anthony then shrugged it off and apologized because he said he's probably just tripping. But he's seen two glowing red eyes in the reflection of the kitchen window looking at him from the reflection of the living room window as the rooms are connected and it was dark out. He then went to bed and I thought nothing of it. As I sat there, I began to feel weird in the living room as the room got quiet. And there was no hum in the room anymore from the fridge or whatever a hum comes from in a quiet house. The house was still. All of a sudden I watched things happen like a movie from my eyes. The TV started to flicker through channels on its own really fast. You almost heard the clicks and statics. Then a light flickered above the kitchen sink. I sat there on my couch unsteadily, not yet scared, but letting what was happening happen as I was still. The TV then shut off on its own and stayed off. That's when one of my earbuds from the kitchen table, the rubber piece, flew across the room as if it detached on its own and was tossed lightly from the kitchen to the floor at my feet in the living room. Those rubber pieces from earbuds do not come off the earbuds without force. The TV then came back on and the house was still. I didn't want to stay at home anymore as no one was up, but I called Anthony's name once or twice to see if he was still up, which he wasn't. I decided to call my grandma in the middle of the night to come get me. She was upset and thought I was drinking or on drugs and lying and tripping. I said, no, I'm sober, which I was. She came and picked me up and made the spare room for me at her house and told me nothing's going to hurt me there. I said okay, but as I was calmly attempting to go to sleep on that memory foam mattress, it's as if I felt two little feet standing above me, jumping back and forth, laughing at me, as if it tricked me and was playing a game with me. I fell into sleep trying to ignore it, and the next day everything was fine. So to this day I'm unsure what came to visit that night. It was a night I'll always remember.